Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Paranormal and Historic Locations and Legends. I am your host, Nick Muley. Tonight's episode we're going to be talking about is it's a place some of you probably have heard of before. It is called the Dakota, located up in Manhattan, New York. Just already seeing a few comments. Let's see who we got right now. Hello, June. Thanks for tuning in. And we're going to talk, obviously, about the history of this place as well as some of the ghost stories associated with it. But I also should point out that part of the story is going to be really relatively dark because this place was also known for a relatively, notorious horror film that was considered one of the first horror films of its kind to have a curse associated with it. So let me just share let's see who else we got here. Hello, Natalie. Thanks for tuning in. I also got to check. I'm just going to check the comments on one other side of the platform here because for some reason, even though I'm broadcasting this on my my own personal profile, the comments are not showing up there. So let me just see who we got on just before. And again, as I always say before, I do apologize if I'm not, shouting out to, anyone watching. It's not that I'm not reading them or ignoring them. It's just that whenever I'm doing my presentations, I can't see the comments when I'm doing this, unfortunately. But I promise after the slideshow is over, and if I got a few minutes left, I'll go back and see what questions any of you might have. All right, we're in the clear right now. Let's see. Hi there. I'm not sure who that is that's saying hello. The only if you want your name to be shown, you got to give StreamYard permission so that way I can see your name. But anyways, let's get down to business. Let me just share the screen. Okay. Just make sure this time it's working because I remember before I was having issues with it. Yep, here we go. All right. So like I already said, so we're going to be talking about a place called the Dakota. It's quite a luxurious, at times somewhat beautiful apartment building. But like I said, there's some of the stuff some of you guys have probably heard of before because this particular apartment building was known to have a number of notorious and well-known tenants that lived there at the time. Unfortunately, some of them just met unfortunate ends. But we'll get to that in just a few minutes. But let's start right from the beginning of what the Dakota. Right from the beginning of the Dakota. So the late 19th century Dakota building is one of Manhattan's most mysterious and exclusive residences. Although every style of building is seen in New York City, the Dakota is a unique blend with steep roofs and with high gabled sides. Balconies jut out from all sides. Decoration is plentiful and again of no real style except that it's all of its own. Now, the Dakota was constructed between October 25th, 1880 and October 27th, 1884. Henry Janeway Hardenberg's architectural firm was commissioned to create the design for Edward Cabot Clark, head of the Singer Manufacturing Company. When the Dakota was built, it was just an apartment building on the far reaches of town. Much of Upper Manhattan at that time was still farmland. Accordingly, author Andrew Alpern, who wrote a book on the history of the Dakota, includes an 1881 clipping from the Real Estate Record and Builder's Guide, which deems the promise of the future apartment building's marvelous change on the west side. Just 4 years later, as the residential apartment boom was underway, Alpern includes a triumphant 1885 article from the same publication that calls the Dakota one of the noblest apartment houses of the world. It was believe it or not built as housing for the aspirational upper middle class as opposed to the moneyed elite who are welcomed in or barred by the building's notorious fussy co-op board these days. The building was reportedly fully rented before it even opened. Thanks to a glowing New York Times review, the Steinway family of Steinway piano fame was one of the Dakota's first residents. though he died in 1883. Peter, I'm probably going to murder his last name. Peter Tch- Peter Tchaikovsky, I don't even know how to say it, is said to have lived there. Perhaps he lived in it before its completion. Okay, so as you can kind of see, actually, just before we get to I start reading more about it. I mean, I know I wasn't able to get quite a large photo of it back in its early days, but it's that photo. I don't know exactly when it was taken, but I can clearly see why a building like that would have gotten a lot of attention back in those days, because you can clearly see this was obviously taken, I would say, somewhere in either in the late 1880s or maybe 1890s or early 1900s. You can quite see Manhattan at that time was I mean, there's a few houses behind, but it was still relatively empty. So, it's just kind of makes you feel kind of funny of just to see how it was when it was first built back then with almost nothing around it and what it looks like today. The building's high gables and deep roofs with a profusion of dormers, terracotta spandrels and panels, niches, balconies, and balustrades gave it a German Renaissance character and an echo of a Hasidic town hall. Its layout and floor plan, however, were strongly influenced by French architectural trends in housing design that had become known in New York City in the 1870s. High above the 72nd Street entrance sits the face of a Dakota Indian. The Dakota, to give a little better description of it, like the actual shape, it's a square building built around a central courtyard, as it was at that time. The arched main entrance is a porche cocher large enough for the horse-drawn carriages that once entered and allowed passengers to disembark shelter from the weather. Many of these carriages were housed in a multi-story stable building built in two sections between 1891 and 1894 at the southwest corner of 77th Street and Amsterdam Avenue, where elevators lifted them to the upper floors. Just before, you know what? I got to just pause this just for a second because I'm looking at the screen. I still see that whoever's comments is up there. Let's get rid of that. Okay, here we go. Let's see. I'm just gonna give another quick shout out to see who else is there. Hey, Jacqueline, good to see you. Again, I'm not sure who these are that are saying hello. You gotta let StreamYard allow you to use your name so that way your names can be seen. So I do apologize that I cannot see who it is, unless you're able to get it working. If you can't, just tell me who you are. Anyways, so the general layout of the apartments is in the French style of the period, with all major rooms connected to each other and enfilade and also accessible from a hall or corridor. The arrangement allows a natural migration for guests from one room to another, especially on festive occasions, yet gives service staff discrete separation circulation patterns that offer service access to the main rooms. The principal rooms, such as parlors or the master bedroom, face the street, while the dining room, kitchen, and other auxiliary rooms are oriented toward the courtyard. Apartments thus are aired from two sides, which are a relative novelty in Manhattan at the time. Some of the drawing rooms are 49 feet long, and many of the ceilings are 14 feet high. 14 feet high. The floors are inlaid with mahogany, oak, and cherry. Now, one second. So the buildings. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, wait a minute. Hang on one second. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, this was okay, my mistake. This was originally supposed to, as I always do, sometimes I have some of the information. I don't try to copy exactly everything from the document to the profile. So here's some of the information I got here. The building's high gables and deep roofs with a profusion of dormers. Oh, wait. No, I already read. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, I'm sorry. Sorry that. Nope, I got that wrong. Okay, anyways, originally from 1884 to 1929, the Dakota had 65 apartments with 4 to 20 rooms. No two apartments being alike. These apartments are accessed by staircases and elevators placed in the four corners of the courtyard. Separate service stairs and elevators serving the kitchens are located mid-block, built to cater to the well-to-do. Well-to-do. The Dakota featured many amenities and a modern infrastructure that was exceptional for the time. The building has a large dining hall. Meals also could be sent up to the apartments by dumbwaiters. Electricity was generated by an in-house power plant, and the building has central heating. Besides servant quarters, there was a playroom and a gymnasium under the roof. In later years, these spaces on the 10th floor were converted into apartments. The Dakota property also contained a garden, private croquet lawns, and a tennis court behind the building between 72nd and 73rd Streets. The building was reportedly fully rented before it even opened, and all apartments were let before the building opened thanks to a glowing New York Times review. But it was a long term drain on the fortune of Clark, who died in 1882, 2 years before it was completed, and his heirs. For the high society of Manhattan, it became fashionable to live in the building, or at least to rent an apartment there as a secondary city residence. And the Dakota's success prompted the construction of many other luxury apartment buildings in Manhattan. Uh, okay, the Steinway family as a oh wait a minute, that's weird. I already have that written. I don't know how that showed up. I'll have to get that later fixed. Oh wait, actually, yeah, that's what. Oh wait a minute, yeah, I already read that. I don't know how that information got there. I'll fix it later. Never mind then. Um, but anyways, by 1932, 3 years after the stock market crash and 3 decades after the novelty of elevators had worn off for most city residents, a piece from the New Yorker refers to the Dakota merely as a solid, commodious, respectable building. 32 years after that, as similar buildings were being torn down across New York, there's a clip from House and Garden magazine that calls it the famous again, this is septuagenarian. I think that's how I said it. Chateau on Central Park West. The building perpetually was named the Dakota because of the time of its construction. The area was sparsely inhabited and considered remote so far in west and north from the inhabited area of Manhattan, just as the Dakota Territory was considered remote. The earliest appearance of the story, however, was in a 1933 newspaper interview, with the Dakota's longtime manager Christopher Gray's book, New York Streetscapes, quotes the interaction thus. Probably was called Dakota because it was so far west and so far north. Gray believed that the building's name stemmed from Clark's fondness for the names of the new western states and territories. Now, at the time before it was converted into a co-op in the 1960s. Rents ranged from $1,000 to $5,600 a year, or roughly, Bloomberg says, $24,000 today. Now, interestingly enough, in Roman Polanski's 1968 film Rosemary's Baby, the Dakota was used for exterior shots of the Bramford. The apartment building in which the story takes place as filming was not allowed inside the building. In Jack Finney's novel Time and Again, the Dakota enables time travel. Of course, just like a lot of these historic places, then, just a year later, the Dakota was designated a New York City landmark in 1969. It was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1972 and was designated as a National Historic Landmark in 1976. Now, from this point on, this is where things starts to get a little dark. I mean, this is not entirely to where things are going to get a little bit more intense, but you will this is just the beginning. So just want to warn you guys just ahead of time. Now, I'm sure a number of you guys probably know that there was a famous tenant who lived at the Dakota. I think we've all heard of this, really sad story that did occur. It was certainly unexpected. But as the city around the Dakota, as the city grew around the Dakota, its once relatively arbitrary Parkside location became one of its main draws. Ambitious bohemians flocked to the buildings in droves, which manifested in many famous and well-known celebrities, including author Harlan Coben, U2's Bono, Rex Reed, Jack Palance, Lillian Gish, Boris Karloff, Rosemary Clooney, Connie Chung, Maury Povich, Lauren Bacall, Judy Garland, and later Roberta Flack. However, the most famous tenants was John Lennon, of course, as we all know, the successful of the successful Beatles, and Yoko Ono, who he was married to, moved into one of the apartment rooms in 1973. That's probably one of their last photos that was probably taken of them. I don't know exactly what year that was. Unfortunately, however, the building gained international recognition when the south entrance of the building was the location of when Lennon was infamously gunned down on the steps of the entrance under its archway on December 8th, 1980. It was a cold December night when he was killed in cold blood by Mark David Chapman. Mark was a music fan with mental health issues. He shot John Lennon 4 times in the shoulder and once in the back. Okay, sorry. I just noticed there was kind of a mistype with part of it. Let's see. Where? Okay. He only took a few steps before he collapsed on the ground. He died at Roosevelt Hospital at the age of 40. Chapman was convicted of second-degree murder and was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison, 5 years less than the maximum sentence of 25 years to life. Believe it or not, Chapman first became eligible for parole in 2000 after serving 20 years in prison. Under New York state law, he is required to have a parole hearing every 2 years from that year beyond. Since that time, a 3-member board has denied Chapman parole 11 times. Before Chapman's first parole hearing, Yoko Ono sent a letter to the board requesting that Chapman should stay behind bars for the remainder of his life. He remains incarcerated at Wendy Correctional Facility. The loss was worldwide news. It marked another handy marker for a turning point in world history. His latest album, Double Fantasy, was released shortly after his death, marking his final album that he recorded. The murder was prominently featured in Andrew Piddington's 2006 film, The Killing of John Lennon, although the Dakota itself was only used for exterior shots. Now, I don't know if a lot of you guys really know this. This was something that I thought was really interesting. Again, this might be a familiar story to some, but it wasn't until recently I found out about this. So this was quite fascinating, in my opinion. It's rumored that $30,000 is buried under the floor of Lennon and Ono's apartment. According to author Stephen Birmingham's 1996 book, Life at the Dakota, the previous resident of John and Yoko's apartment hid the money under the master bedroom floor. Whether that's true will remain a question, as the board refuses to destroy the floor to solve the mystery. Now, these days, apartments in the building regularly sell in the 8 digits. Lauren Bacall's 9-room apartment of 53 years sold less for $23.5 million before her death in 2014. Another of the building's apartments has been on the market for nearly a decade, seeking $14.5 million. The least expensive apartment in the building is a tight 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom pad, seeking $3.6 million. By the Bureau of Labor Statistics inflation counter, that $3.6 million whittles down just $149,348.13, likely an insurmountable sum to the building's erstwhile occupants. The times within the walls of the Dakota and in New York City at large sure have changed. An entrance to the 72nd Street station on the New York City's subway B and C trains is outside the building. Now, okay, I accidentally went a little farther, but let's see. Just want to see who's so talking. Let's see. Hey, Elliot. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Elliot. Really appreciate it. Yeah, it really is, Regina. I couldn't agree with you more. Um, Although historically home to many creative and artistic people, the building and its co-op board of directors were criticized in 2005 by former resident Albert Macelis. I'm terrible with names. He attempted to sell his ownership to actors Melanie Griffin and Antonio Banderas, who were rejected by the board. Maisles expressed his disappointment with the building seems to be changing by telling the New York Times, "What's so shocking is that the building is losing its touch with interesting people. More and more, they're moving away from creative people and going toward people who just have the money." Even before this, Gene Simmons, Billy Joel, Madonna, Cher, and Carly Simon were all denied residency by the board. In 2002, the board rejected Dennis Mahil, the corrugated cardboard magnate and Democratic Party nominee for Lieutenant Governor of New York. In 2015, a suit was brought forward alleging the building's co-op board of racist resident approval, though the case was soon thereafter dismissed for lack of evidence. The Dakota Stables building was in operation as a garage until February 2007, when it was slated to be transferred by the related companies into a condominium residence. Since then, the large condominium building, the Harrison, occupies its spot. The building's facade was renovated in 2015. Now, as for the Dakota today, the Dakota remains among the toniest addresses in the Big Apple, with its ironclad board monitoring new resident applications. Now, that's pretty much obviously the history, going from the beginning up to the modern era. But I must warn some of you guys now we're going to get to a little bit more to the darker side. We're actually going to get to we're going to go back just a notch to one of the other historical events, and this was back when the movie Rosemary's Baby was filmed and the associated curse that followed. So there's going to be some pretty dark things you guys are going to learn in just a minute. Let me just see. I just want to give one other shout out. Oh, wow. We've already gone for 20 minutes. All right. Hang on. All right. Excuse me. So, anyways, let's get to the associated curse, not necessarily of the Dakota itself, but with Rosemary's Baby. I'll be honest, I decided to add the curse story along with this because even though it doesn't really have too much association of the Dakota itself, not only was it because it was the filming location of Rosemary's Baby, but more importantly, just the amount of negative energy that came out of this film. There's going to be some stuff that might relatively shock you guys, so just be aware. Now, anyways, Rosemary's Baby is based on Ira Levin's 1967 novel and can be and considered by some as the godmother to all the satanic horror films that followed it, from The Exorcist to The Omen. Now, he came up with the idea for the book in 1965, drawing inspiration from his wife, who was pregnant at the time, his New York apartment, and the anxiety of being a parent. The struggling writer imagined a world where there was no God and the devil was allowed to reign freely. This is evident in the iconic ending where Rosemary finds out that her husband sold her womb to Satan and that her child is the Antichrist. Levin was catapulted into the highest echelons of the literary world due to the success of his novel, and a year later, a European author who was looking for his own Hollywood break decided to direct the film adaptation of his novel. Now, this is where the supposed curse begins. Actor Sidney Blackmer, who played Coven leader Roman Castevet, is said to have once warned on set that no good will come of all this Hail Satan business. Apparently, he wasn't the only one who thought so. It's kind of odd. I have to admit, I got to pause here just for a second. Let's just see who's Hey, Bob. Good to see you. Thanks for tuning in. Okay, hang on a second. I don't know how I got there. Okay, now, anyways, I gotta say, what I find really bizarre is for an actor to base for a guy who's playing let's in this case the satanic leader of obviously a satanic cult. They're supposed to be, the group of Satan worshipers. I find it odd how he's playing that kind of character, yet he delivers this warning or this message to the cast and crew of this, you know, what eventually became one of the, again, a very, infamous film. I just find it so weird how, he's playing a satanic leader, yet he warns everyone that no good's going to come out of this. So it's kind of I don't know what it is. That's just really bizarre, but it's almost eerie at the same time, in my opinion. Um, but anyways, when it was released to America, it was an instant hit. But there's long been a rumor that the satanic overtones of the film imbued the picture with a curse that the cast and crew suffered from the moment the film went into production. Um, Rumors of cursed movie sets have been a norm in Hollywood since the Golden Age, but they're rarely amounted to anything more than rumors. However, the sheer amount of Rosemary's Baby filming the sheer amount of Rosemary's Baby filming tragedies gives credence to the idea that there was actually a curse unlocked during one of the dark film shoots on the most satanic movie in history. Over the years, the myth surrounding director Roman Polanski's 1968 film has only grown in stature. The iconic work has gone down in film history as one of the pioneering efforts of the genre, exploring counterculture symbolism as well as launching a philosophical yet entertaining investigation of the relevance of theological institutions in the modern world. Rosemary's Baby is still appreciated by audiences all over the world over 50 years after its release. But it is also important to note the curse history of the film. And I got to point this out because good thing I have it right here. Of course, I myself, I don't know if you're going to see very well from the small screen, but I myself have a copy of Rosemary's Baby. I'm hoping that let me just make sure that it's not. Yeah. Okay, it is showing because I thought it wasn't gonna. I thought it was gonna blend in with the virtual background. So, and I still haven't even opened it yet. I got it a few months ago. So, but definitely, again, classic movie. But now now I'm gonna give you some of the true details, including about this place. So, continuing onwards. Now, as far as curses go, Mia Farrow got off fairly light when it came to Rosemary's Baby. Before she was cast in the film, Farrow was married to Frank Sinatra, and he desperately wanted her to appear in a film with him, The Detective, also being produced by Robert Evans. Sinatra went so far as to tell Farrow that he didn't see her in the part, but he decided to take on the project anyway while doing double duty in Sinatra's film. As the production for Rosemary's Baby stretched on, she began flying back and forth from New York City to Los Angeles to try and do both films. But Sinatra didn't feel like this was enough. Instead of working something out with Farrell, he sent his lawyer to the set of Rosemary's Baby and had Farrell served with divorce papers. Now, prior to casting proto-indie author I don't know if it's supposed to say author or actor because that's how I found it. John Cassavetes as Rosemary's husband Guy, the production company wanted a young Robert Redford for the part. Unfortunately, something shady happened between Paramount Pictures producer Robert Evans and Redford, and the actor never spoke to the producer again. This created a hole for Polanski to plug in his choice for the role, Cassavetes. According to Farrell, things were peachy keen between Cassavetes and Polanski during pre-production. She said they spent a lot of time palling around and riding motorcycles together. But as filming began, fissures in their relationship began to form. Kasovitz wanted to improve and explore the space, but that's not the way that Polanski worked. Farrell said that Polanski planned his shots down to minor details and that there was no place for Kasovitz's preferred style of acting. Of their time together, Polanski simply said, John Kasovitz was not my best spirit experience, I have to say. Now, a brief mention of the Dakota itself involving this curse is that the Dakota's Gothic style gives it all the darkness it needs to convince one that it's the home to witches. And Robert Evans claims that the whole time he was on set at the apartment building, he felt a distinctly eerie feeling. Now I know some, especially those in the horror genre, probably know who this is. Uh, William Castle, who actually did produce this film. Producer William Castle was the man who first recognized the potential of Levin's work and secured the rights to make a film adaptation. Best known for his work on B-grade horror films, Castle wanted to direct it initially, but Robert Evans agreed to go ahead with the project only if Castle worked as a producer. Castle has long been touted as the producer who saw the viability in Ira Levin's novel and sought to bring it to a screen. Unfortunately, in many ways, and not intentionally, obviously, but he was somewhat the man responsible for bringing the curse of Rosemary's Baby into the lives of so many people, into the world of cinema. Excuse me. I gotta admit, I mean, I've always been a huge fan of his work. William Castle. It's if that's true, I gotta say I feel really bad for the guy because quite obviously this was an unintentional attack. So you can't really blame someone for bringing some kind of negative energy to such a film like this. And I just want to point out for those who've seen Rosemary's Baby as well as William Castle's films of the 50s and early 60s as well. There's actually some of you guys might remember this. There's a scene in the film where he does make a cameo appearance. It's where Mia Farrow is at a telephone booth and there's a guy waiting outside. That guy that's waiting out there is William Castle. In fact, I think that actually might have been because he always worked when he did his films. They were usually in black and white. This might have been his only color appearance, as far as I know, unless there's other films out there. I just want to see who's on right now. Hey, Dave, good to see you. Appreciate you coming on. Chrissy, what's going on? Listen. For those that don't know, that's Chrissy's line. But anyways, moving forward. In April of 1969, Castle was sent a creepy letter after the film hit cinemas reading, "Bastard, believer of witchcraft, worshiper at the shrine of Satanism. My prediction is you will slowly rot during a long and painful illness which you have brought upon yourself." Now, sick with worry and under a lot of stress from the hate mail he received constantly, Castle was suddenly stricken with severe kidney stones and had to be hospitalized. While delirious in the hospital, he hallucinated scenes from the film and convinced himself the movie was cursed. Now, get this. During one visit to the emergency room and during surgery, he is said to have yelled, "Rosemary, for God's sake, drop the knife," referencing the titular character who believes her neighbors are part of a satanic cult. His condition was so severe that he needed surgery. I should have fixed that up actually when I said about surgery. Castle, now, fortunately, Castle recovered, but just barely, however, and never made a Hollywood hit nor reached that level of success again. Castle grew convinced that, I already said that before, the odd occurrences that happened after filming were enough to convince him that the movie's events were coming true. He later wrote that after getting the recognition he desired, he no longer cared. "I was at home, very frightened of Rosemary's Baby. This bad career luck was not what caused him to believe the film was cursed, though. Instead, it was the series of frightening events that took place while he recovered." I got to be honest, when I started putting this slideshow together, this actually did start giving me the chills because I've never heard of anything like this. Now, producer and sometimes actor Robert Evans was not exempt from this alleged curse either. Evans has had a storied life in Hollywood. He got his start in Hollywood in an adaptation of Ernest Hemingway's The Sun Always Rises. But his career really took off and rose to the major hits when he spearheaded the production of The Detective, Rosemary's Baby, and later The Godfather for Paramount. Hang on once, I need a drink. However, his good luck in the film industry would come with some very hefty receipts. He was convicted for possession and trafficking of cocaine in 1980 and got a suspended prison sentence. As part of his plea bargain, Evans had to make an anti-drug commercial. Now, even more strangely, 3 years later in 1983, Evans got tied to an execution-style high-profile murder of Roy Radin at the Cotton Club, which has come to be known as the Cotton Club murder. Despite two witnesses testifying that Evans was involved in the case, he was later cleared of the charges. Later in life, he suffered multiple strokes, one of them while giving a speech in honor of late director Wes Craven. So that would have been, like 7-8 years ago. Even though he's been put through the ringer, it seems that nothing can keep Evans down for long, not even an alleged satanic curse. But it definitely took its toll. In 1993, he told the New York Times, I had 10 years of a horrific life. I had 10 years of a horrific life. I think that's how you say it. There were nights I cried myself to sleep. And I think that's actually a later photo. Yeah, it is. That's a later photo of him. Now, this is where that's. I wish I could say that was all, but there's so much more that really did occur. So things are going to be a hell lot worse. But while Castle was recovering, the first true unlucky soul was Christoph Komeda, the movie's composer, who suffered an accidental fall that led to a coma and eventually his death. Now, strangely, I wasn't able to find any photographs of him. Oh, wait a minute. Hang on. That's weird. Oh, wait a minute. Okay. It's kind of weird that it just seemed like I don't know if I missed it or if it just got frozen. Chrissy. What's up, Donna? But anyways, let's see. So it's strange. I wasn't able. Oh wait, no. What am I saying? No, that is him, Christoph. My mistake. It's been a while since I've seen this slideshow. No, I definitely will go back and fix a few things on this. So, unfortunately, details of his death are still scarce, but Polanski told it this way. In the autumn of 1968, 37-year-old Komeda was roughhousing at a party in Los Angeles, California, just months after completing his work on the film, when he fell off a rocky escarpment and suffered a cerebral hemorrhage. After the fall, Komeda went into a 4-month coma, the very same affliction Levin's witches used to kill Rosemary's suspicious friend. Hutch in the book, Komeda languished for some time, but never regained consciousness and died in Poland the following year. Now, believe it or not, despite that, Rosemary's Baby really didn't have, or even, really didn't have anything to do with this. Again, the curse even expanded. In addition to what you guys are hearing, that alleged curse also supposedly expanded to what eventually became one of the most notorious crimes and murders in America. The most high-profile piece of misfortune, tangent. I cannot even say that word. Tangent. I cannot say. I'm just going to move forward. Related to the film, and perhaps the person who was hit the hardest and the most sickening incident linked to a cursed film after the filming of the hit picture ended was the film director Roman Polanski, retold into legend, even by him. Polanski had relocated to California alongside his new girlfriend, actress Sharon Tate, who was fresh off her first movie role as a witch in Eye of the Devil. just before filming began. She had gunned hard for the lead role in Rosemary's Baby, and Polanski wanted to include her as well, but was overruled by Robert Evans and was adamant for Mia Farrow's involvement. Evans got his way when Paramount cast her. Tate instead loitered around the set and was instead reallocated, appearing uncredited in the background of Rosemary's young people only party scene, and some say becoming increasingly obsessed with the occult. Many years later, a friend. Oh, wait. Okay, never mind. Okay, yeah. Many years later, a friend quoted her in print as having said, "The devil is beautiful. Most people think he's ugly, but he's not." Polanski last saw Tate, by then his wife, and I don't know why it says very pregnant, very pregnant in July, noting in his autobiography a grotesque thought he had at the time. "You will never see her again," he wrote. A year on August 8th, excuse me, a year on August 8th, 1969, after the film was released, Tate and some of her friends were staying in a rented house in CeeLo Drive in Los Angeles when Tex Watson and some girls from the Manson family broke in. Tate and 3 others were brutally murdered, all of them stabbed to death by the Manson family, as was their unborn son, all while Rosemary's Baby still lingered in theaters, which is one of Hollywood's most gruesome and notorious murders. Tate was 8.5. I should have pressed that next. Tate was 8.5 months pregnant at the time of her demise. The members of the Manson family delivered around 100 stab wounds to the 4 victims. Unable to make such a sense of such a tragedy and captivated by the stories of the Manson family, the public took to Satan and curses as the only explanation. Now, strangely, internet fanatics say, like Guy Woodhouse, Polanski made his young wife a blood sacrifice for his still untouchable status in Hollywood and beyond, which I think is just ridiculous, for them to actually think that. Um, Others maintain that the Manson murders were a mere moment in a grand satanic conspiracy scored by the Beatles. Uh, the White Album was written largely in an Indian meditation with Mia. And get this, the White Album was written largely at an Indian meditation with Mia Farrow in attendance. So the same actress who was in Rosemary's Baby was also at the recording of one of the Beatles, final albums. And to go back to the briefly to John Lennon's murder, about almost over a decade later, John Lennon may have not had anything to do with Rosemary's Baby, but he was friends with Mia Farrow. And when the Manson family dispatched Sharon Tate, they wrote Helter Skelter, albeit misspelled, scrawled on the wall in blood at the crime scene, which Charles Manson used a blueprint for his revolution. Ironically, Helter Skelter is one of the songs in the White Album which Manson used as a blueprint. That I don't know how that showed up again. Okay, I'm gonna have to go back and fix that later. The Dakota not only served as the exterior for the apartments in Rosemary's Baby, but eventually, as I said before, it was the site of Lennon's eventual demise. However, the fleeting association with the film has led fans of the film to link Lennon's assassination with the curse of the film. And again, as a recap, 12 years after Tate's passing, Lennon was assassinated across the street from the Dakota in 1980 when alleged fan Mark David Chapman, who was influenced by Salinger's novel The Catcher in the Rye, and the loneliness of protagonist Holden Caulfield fired 5 rounds into the singer's shoulder and back. I really wish that this could end, but man, it's just like, let me just see. I just want to take a quick shout out for everyone who's been watching. And I think my phone just died. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is let me just take a break for just a second. Just want to see who's all on. That's odd. Now it's apparently just showing the comments from my profile. That is weird. Never seen that before. Okay. Now, just when I thought, now when I've learned a lot about the history itself, I mean about this curse itself. I mean, just when I thought things couldn't get a lot worse associated with this curse, they definitely do, because after this, horrific murder that occurred. Wait, let me just turn the next page. Another pretty big crime did occur eventually, this time to Roman Polanski himself, which this case I'm not going to say too many details. So, after the gruesome slaying of his wife and unborn son, shortly after filming Rosemary's Baby, Roman Polanski fell into a tailspin which included addiction and crime to cope with things. But he ended up exemplifying human depravity. While guest editing the French edition of Vogue in 1977, Polanski came across then 13-year-old Samantha Geimer, whom he coaxed into posing for a series of photo shoots. During the second of these shoots, which took place at Jack Nicholson's house, Polanski plied the girl with alcohol and other hard substances before sexually assaulting her multiple times. Shortly afterwards, Polanski was taken into custody and spent 42 days in jail. However, Polanski became a fugitive and fled the country to France in order to avoid facing charges. Since then, he has lived the life of a criminal and has avoided traveling to countries where it is possible for him to be extradited back to the U.S. So, and believe it or not, that crime alone too, they sometimes actually do link that as part of the curse to Rosemary's Baby. There was just a lot of misfortune that really did occur with this particular film. But now on the final chapter of the curse, if you want to call it this way, is unfortunately to the author himself, Era 11. Era 11 had a huge success on his hands with the novel. It was a bestseller, and the rights were almost immediately snatched up by William Castle. However, he was not immune from the supposed curse of Rosemary's Baby. While Levin never fell from a cliff to his dramatic demise, he suffered a more fitting kind of poetic justice. After the film was released, his life began to slowly crumble until he was a parody of himself. First, his marriage crumbled and his wife left him, with a divorce finalized in 1968. Notoriously private, Levin never gave details of the breakup, though the Stepford Wives, published 4 years later, maybe says it all. He never rode the Rosemary's Baby wave into Hollywood, perhaps a blessing in disguise, but he certainly got the fame he sought. Additionally, not everyone was pleased with Levy's attacks on religion. He began receiving targeted strikes and severe backlash from the Catholic Church. Catholics in particular bombarded him with ongoing criticism for his blasphemy, as did the Catholic Church, which very publicly slapped a C rating, condemned, onto the film for its mockery of religious persons and practices. Despite claiming he never believed in witches, curses, or Satanism, he said over and over again, he said over and again, yet fear grew in him just the same. He would end his career as a recluse in obscurity. He was never the same man again, growing increasingly paranoid over the years. On a 1980 episode of the Dick Cavett Show, appearing alongside a gregarious Stephen King, Levin sits quiet, pensive, and insecure. "I don't recall being scared at all," he said of his childhood horror inspirations. "Now I'm terrified." By 1992, in a rare interview, Levin confessed to having mixed feelings about Rosemary's Baby, including religious guilt. His work had played a significant part in all this popularization of the occult and belief in witchcraft and Satanism. He acknowledged, while in the same breath dismissing all these people who hear backward messages and song lyrics and stuff like that. Then, in a rare admission of regret, he said, "I really feel a certain degree of guilt about having fostered that kind of irrationality. But his family is adamant that the regret wasn't in the book. It was in something else," said novelist David Morrow, co-founder of the International Thriller Writers Organization and former University of Iowa professor of English. who wrote a new intro to Rosemary's Baby for its 50th birthday reissue. After decades of endless copycats and spin-offs and made-for-TV movies that made the book feel like a campy caricature, I cannot say the word for some reason, Levin grew seemingly disdainful of his defining work. He wrote less and to less acclaim, rarely did interviews, and stopped mingling among the New York literary circles he once so desperately wanted to be a part of. If Levin ever really experienced or enjoyed his literary fame, he didn't say so. I never once heard him comment on his career or what had happened, said Morrow. I'm just initiating that he initiating I cannot say it, that he had to know he was a success, but I'm not sure he did. Unfortunately, the saddest part of Levin's downfall came 30 years after the release of the film. When Rosemary's last big anniversary rolled around, Levin phoned in a planned sequel, Son of Rosemary, which was widely panned by critics and quickly forgotten. Yet it became a bestseller just the same funding Levin's last decade until his death in 2007, and becoming a sort of cruel ongoing joke about the fleeting and arbitrary nature of his success. Of course, I didn't send back any of the royalty checks, he deadpan, poking fun at himself as a sellout and fraud. It was one of those jokes that's half true, and it was the last book he ever wrote. The story, okay, I forgot to click one. The story of Rosemary's Baby was happening in real life. Witches, all of them, were casting their spell, and I was becoming one of the principal players, William Castle later recalled. Okay, so we just only got about 8 minutes, 8 minutes left. So I just got a few more slides to present. That now ends the curse segment, as I would call it. Man, I mean, just hearing all the misfortune that went on with the supposed curse and the crimes that followed, it's just like, how do you even explain that? I mean, it would seem too weird for such a coincidence like that. It would be too bizarre to have such a coincidence like that. I mean, I've never seen, anything like that, involving any other films. And it's very intense. It really is pretty scary when you think about it. So, of course, after everything that's this place that the Dakota has gone through, as well as the supposed curse of this well-known horror film, of course, you're also going to have your ghost stories. Believe it or not, however, stories of ghost sightings have loomed around the building for years, going as far back as the 1930s. But even more intimidating than its rumors of hauntings is the Gothic-style building's picky co-op board, which is made a sport of rejecting rich and famous applicants, which that already enough. As I read earlier for the history segment, that seems relatively shady. A construction worker who was working near the apartment stated he saw a figure with the body of a man but the face of a young boy. Coinciding with the death of another famous resident, Judy Holliday, the construction workers also felt like they were being closely watched while they worked, or perhaps they were just being too loud. Now, John Lennon himself, believe it or not, prior to his death, had reported seeing supernatural happenings. Oh, I already said that. John Lennon himself had reported seeing supernatural happenings prior to his death. He claims he saw a UFO from one of the windows of the apartment in the Dakota building. He also repeatedly met a ghost he called the Crying Lady Ghost. She was said to be lurking benevolently in the hallways of the older parts of the by now extended and modified building. The going theory is that Lennon and others who've seen this crying lady are seeing the ghost of Elise Vesley, who managed the Dakota through the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. Elise, who was way into, believe it or not, Elise, who was way into the paranormal herself, believed that she had psychokinetic powers and was a major player on the Vendinist movement. As is often the story when it comes to ghosts, Mrs. Vesley suffered a great tragedy when her son was hit by a truck outside the Dakota. The boy died, and by all accounts, Mrs. Vesley was never the same again. She took to being extra nice, extra protective of the children that lived in the Dakota. It is believed that she still remains in the Dakota, watching over the children of tenants who live there today. Um, Now, let's see. Now that I don't know if this would be the same, you know, apparition, but considering that there was a construction worker who saw the apparition of a man but with a young boy's face, that makes me wonder, could that be Elisa's son? Perhaps appearing what he would have looked like had he been older, but may have not been able to fully complete that appearance. Now, ironically enough, it is said that the spirit of John Lennon lives on in Dakota apartments to this day. Many people claim to see John Lennon leaning against the wall in his characteristic white flared suit with an eerie light surrounding him in the store archway where he died. The first reported sighting of John Lennon's ghost was in 1983 when John Harrow and Amanda Moore spotted the Beatles standing at the entrance of the Dakota. Harrow claimed that Lennon was surrounded by an ominous light, and Moore said that she almost walked up to Lennon, but the look on his face suggested he wasn't in the mood to talk to strangers. One resident witnessed John Lennon playing piano right in their apartment. The most famous story of John Lennon's ghost appearing at the Dakota was told by Yoko Ono. Yoko Ono. I keep saying, yeah. Ono, who still lived in the Dakota for 20 years after his death, said she saw the spirit of the musical god sitting at his piano. Lennon turned to Yoko, and she claimed he said, "Do not be afraid. I'm still here with you before vanishing." Now, one reoccurring in addition to John Lennon's spirit himself, one reoccurring happening has been that objects have been seen in their apartments to move of their own accord, even large objects like furniture or rugs. Residents also often report hearing tiny footsteps and odd noises at strange times in their apartments. Frederick Weinstein, a resident with his wife Susanna, went on record reporting seeing the lights of a chandelier in his living room form below on the street. He saw this through the 72nd Street window. However, he does not have any chandeliers. However, when he ran into his apartment, the lights were gone. But upon further investigation, he did notice a patched up set of bolts in the ceiling where a chandelier had once hung. That seems kind of... Now, when you think about it, just the fact that he supposedly saw a chandelier in his own apartment building, and finding it was not there, but finding the I guess platform, if you want to call it, where the building where a chandelier once was, quite interesting. It definitely goes into that subject of haunted objects. It's already 6:30. I just got a few more things I just got to say. A few more things to complete this presentation. So we are going to go over, but just probably only like about 5 minutes. I know that as far as I know, there's no show right after me. Residents also claim to have seen a little girl for decades. First seen by painters, it is reported that the girl wears a period yellow taffeta dress. I don't know if that's how you say that. That nearly matches her blonde hair, white stockings, and black leather shoes with silver buckling. She bounces a red ball down the halls and is often seen entering or exiting closets. When the painters first saw the girl, she looked at them and proclaimed, "It's my birthday," before disappearing down a hall. Not long after, one of the painters died when he fell off a scaffolding and down a stairwell. Everyone decided to blame the girl, though no other deaths have been reported from other encounters with her. She's also been seen waving and smiling from several lower windows. Okay. So this is the last slide, actually. The most sinister stories in the Dakota, believe it or not, comes from the basement. John Paytoner was an electrician working on the Dakota in the late 1930s. The wiring of the building was, according to Paytner, pretty crazy, with bits and bobs he had never seen before. Often Paytner would take pieces of the circuitry home to try and figure them out. It was late one night while Paytner was in the basement of the Dakota working on one of these weird pieces when he came across the weirdest thing he ever did see. From out of the shadows of the basement came a short man. The man wore a frock coat and a winged collar. He had small steel rimmed glasses that were held up by a very large nose. A well kept beard could not hide the very fake looking wig the short man wore. The short man walked up to Paytner and angrily glared at him for what, according to Paytner, felt like minutes. Paytner, I keep saying that. Then, as if this were a normal thing to do, the short man pulled off his wig and violently shook it in Paytner's face before vanishing. Paytner had 4 more run-ins with the short-wigged ghost and never figured out who it was. But believe it was the ghost of Edward Cabot Clark, the man who built the Dakota. And you can kind of see he does have that resemblance to even though we cannot actually see his size, and I don't know if that's a real photo or if that's a sketch of him, but the rest of the features pretty much matches that particular apparition. In fact, I think this might be the only known image of Edward Clark. Apparently, Clark, who died before the Dakota was finished, wasn't all that jazzed about this electrician screwing with his building. However, bizarrely, like I said, Clark never lived in the building himself. Mr. Clark wasn't the only guy to be upset with changes to the Dakota. Joe Milsner, I don't even know how to say it, considered the greatest set designer of the golden age of Broadway, lived in the Dakota for years. Milsner, I think that's how you say it, or Milsner, died in a cab outside of the Dakota in 1976. He was on the way back from visiting his doctor, who was clearly not very good, and by all accounts, he was not happy about it. In the weeks following Milsner's death, workers at the Dakota were resigned by something throwing items around the basement. Now, I'm not trying to get political here, but I strangely, future U.S. Secretary of Commerce and Republican Wilbur Ross, I was unable to find an older photograph of him, so that's why I'm using a modern photo. He was a tenant of the building at the time, who was called into the basement by a porter who had the intent to show him objects moving mysteriously on their own. Earlier, he saw a shovel fly off its spot on the wall and land in the middle of the room, some 20 feet away. Not long after, bags of garbage started to fly about the basement. While Ruber was not present for these moments, he claimed to have seen a large iron bar come off the wall by its own accord and fly at him, nearly hitting the porter and landing at his feet. The 2 men were down in the basement investigating these claims. Wilbur attempted to lift the bar, but only to find it was way too heavy for him to lift. Okay. The most frightening possible spirit at the Dakota is the one with the most ominous name, the Phantom of the Dakota. Sometimes called the Mad Slasher, this possible spirit has never hurt anyone, though not for lack of trying. It started when people noticed that someone was vandalizing the newly installed elevators, which were coincidentally designed by Joe Milsner before his death. The elevators were being attacked with what seemed to be a knife. Giant slashes ran through the paneled walls, too high to have been done by a child, and so deep that whoever was doing it had to be very strong. Every week, the panels would be replaced, only to be slashed up a few days later. As this was going on, odd piles of shredded paper were found in the halls of the 9th floor, piled up in a fashion that suggested someone was looking to start a fire. Residents began to become suspicious of each other. As one may expect, rumors spread about who was behind all this. Things reached a boiling point when a can of paint fell from the roof into the courtyard, just barely missing a tenant. The strangest part of it was that there was no painting or remodeling happening at the time. There was no reason for a can of paint to be on the roof. People began to wonder if the paint can fall or if it was thrown. I mean, if the paint can fell or if it was thrown. A group of residents of the building took it upon themselves to set up a secret spy club. They would set themselves up in hiding spots and with binoculars watch the comings and goings between the various buildings. All they found were multiple spouses uh, who were having a, who were having affairs. The Phantom of the Dakota seemed to disappear as quickly as he appeared. Some believe that it was once again Mr. Clark coming back once more, unhappy with the new elevators. And let's just see. And that actually concludes our slideshow for tonight. So, wow, quite a story I had to tell. This was definitely quite a legend. Let's see who we had here. Makes Natalie says here. Oh wait, let's get rid of that. Makes you wonder if there was real deal done with the devil to get the film. It could have been. It could have very well been, Natalie. Yeah, Dave. I very much aware. Poltergeist was just as cursed. I'm actually, believe it or not, I'm actually going to be doing a presentation of that one real soon, along with the true inspiration for it. Okay. Well, I think I know I went a few minutes over time. We're definitely going to end it here for now. Let me just see, because again, I don't know why it's not showing everybody's comments, or maybe it's just the same ones. I just want to make a quick shout out for anyone else that I might have missed. But while I'm doing that, I just want to say I really appreciate a lot of you guys taking the time to tune in. You know, obviously this is my 5th episode I've done for the show, so I really appreciate the support. Next week we're going to be talking about what are we going to be talking about next week? Who we have? Who do we have? Who do we have? What do we have? I'm not like these other shows where they have. I'm not like the other shows where they have guests. So for next week, we got. Give me 1 second here. We got. I think I got an idea of what. Oh wait, here we go. So for. Okay, here we go. So for next week's presentation, I might be doing 2 locations this time. I'm not sure. It all depends once again on the amount, how long both of them are going to take. But let's see, here we go. Hey, bad to the bone here to support. I'm not sure who that is because it's not showing your name. I know I said this earlier to whoever that to a few others, but if you can allow StreamYard to have your name, I'm still figuring that out myself, but if you allow StreamYard, if you allow permission for StreamYard to have some kind of access, I'll be able to see your name. So I do apologize for whoever's watching. I just can't see who that is. Unless you just want to put your name in the comments themselves, yourself. So just so I know who that is. But yeah, like I said though, Angelina. Yeah. Yep. Definitely, definitely got StreamYard gotcha. But yeah, we'll probably be talking about possibly 2 locations. We're gonna be, and ironically enough, this is where this is where another film was made. The difference is, however, there is no curse associated with it, but you can kind of very well say this was the second adaptation of the novel The Haunting of Hill House. It's not a remake, and it's sure as hell not the remake of The Haunting like I did previously. What's up, Tim? I'm actually just about to be ending in just a minute or two, so but glad you got to come in. So yeah, we're going to talk about 2 locations. They're both out in the UK. They are called, if I'm getting this said correctly, Whitehurst Palace, and then or it's one of the names, and then the other one is what's known as Blenheim Palace. Again, 2 large locations, castle-like structures out in the UK. A lot of history behind them, especially Blenheim Palace. Worst comes to worst, I may actually have to make that a separate show because that one's going to take a while. But the cool part about them is, just like some of these other locations, surprisingly, I didn't find too much about Whitehurst, paranormal wise, but Blenheim definitely has some ghost stories. But what's the main point about these two locations is that they were both, if I'm correct, the filming locations of the movie The Legend of Hell House. So, and I have a DVD copy of that too, which I'll present for next week. But yeah, that's what. And actually, just before we end, I should have, as I always do with a lot of these films, because since we talked a lot about Rosemary's Baby, I'm actually going to end it with you guys with the trailer of it. For anyone that hasn't seen the film, I thought, just like I've done previously, it would be appropriate to show the trailer. Let me just see. I should have had it. I should have had it ready before, but I wasn't. I wasn't. I was in a rush. Getting things ready. So give me 1 second. Of course, after a stupid ad. Again, I know I'm running a little bit over time, but this is where we're going to end definitely. But as this ad's going, like I said, I really appreciate you guys coming on. Again, tune into next week. I'm glad you guys have really been enjoying the show because obviously I'm trying my absolute hardest. But no, seriously, thank you guys. Thank you. Okay, stop screen. Okay, so let me just share the. So yeah, we'll put it off for the end with the movie trailer. If I could, I just want to make sure that this is working correctly. Okay, here we go. So, yep, here we go. So, for those of you who have never seen it, here is the trailer of Rosemary's Baby. Is what I would call, like I said earlier, the first film of its kind to have this a supposed curse attached to it.
Hey, let's make that.
You know what? Actually, on second thought, I don't know if it's such a good idea. I didn't see the trailer, so you guys can check it out for yourselves. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on again. I really appreciate it, and I will see you guys next. And also too for the Petri dish, which I'll be on co-hosting tomorrow. I think we're having Daniel Clace on. So yeah, that's pretty much it. All right, guys. You guys have a great night, and I'll see you guys. I'll see some of you guys tomorrow night, and for everyone else, I'll see you guys next week. You all have a great night.